This video is made possible by SimpliSafe. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. We are about to embark on some of the craziest things ever, and I don't mean that like a YouTuber. I mean that as in the guy who is currently in charge of starting up the world's only 12 rotor. One of the biggest parts to have to rely on is the electronics. Ethan got all this set up for my Haltech. Now, when I say trust and rely on, that is the cornerstone of that. This isn't even an ad. This is straight up, I trust my work and you guys not seeing this thing fail miserably on Haltech UC10, or it's gonna be an IC7 with buttons to turn it off in case I go out of control. An extra wideband sensor because the R5, the ECU that's gonna be sitting here, has 2 built in, but we have to be special and we wanna have 3 oxygen sensors. So we have a spare one also going right here. And then at the bottom down here, each single rotor will have an exhaust temperature. Without having the turbos on here, this is actually a lot less complicated looking. We are going to wire all of the injectors individually be able to be controlled. That's more injectors than even the R5 can control. So once they all go to here, we're gonna split them together. The R5 is strong enough to shoot 2 injectors at once. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. We have 2 rotors firing at once. 1 injector on this one, 1 injector on this one will shoot the same amount of fuel into each rotor. Same thing down here. That looks like rounds of some sort of ammunition. Ethan has moved them away from each other, so now I can get all the connectors in and out. Anything you can imagine related to 3 massive turbos, 2 throttle bodies, drive-by-wire, 1 E-gate, all of the sensors, all of the power. This is going to be one hell of a video. This camera is perfect for people like me because the landlord doesn't want me to touch the building. Well, I still want to make sure that nobody breaks into the truck. Well, I want it low enough so that way you can see people's faces, but high enough that they can't grab it. So once that's screwed on there, nice and tight, you just take this piece, cover that up, and the camera goes just like that. So let's see what that looks like. Really see the quality of this shot, and so most importantly the insight. With that camera, one of the coolest, most innovative things that SimpliSafe has created is the Active Guard outdoor protection. So that camera can proactively see threats before there's a break-in. You can use SimpliSafe's AI to identify people that are supposed to be there and people that are not. Whatever the situation is, they can dispatch police before your poor front window is broken in. And if that's not enough, we still have everything that you can customize a SimpliSafe system with even more simply and even more safe. The glass break sensor, the carbon monoxide sensor, the cameras indoor, outdoor, the entry sensors. I mean, the list is absolutely massive, and we're using a lot of those here to keep this shop running smoothly. Save 60% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for a select professional monitoring plan and get your first month free. Go to simplisafe.com/RobDahm to take advantage of that. That's simplisafe.com/RobDahm. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. I ordered actually a fun little variety of things for the 12 rotor to speed this process up. It's like $1,000 even. So
that's odd.
The games have just begun. What we got here, first of all, is stuff that can simplify the process. So this is pre-printed little labels. That is the connector for a Lambda, for a Bosch wideband. And so that this will be part of the harness, not a second harness running past everything else. Here's where I'm gonna get super excited. I'm gonna geek out. So you guys saw us use mil-spec, or really the correct term would be auto sport connectors on the 4-rotor, and my buddy Kevin did a phenomenal job with that process. But I'm gonna take that a step further and treat it just like the Indy car. Hidden in here is the boots that are meant to go on these. So it's all gonna be booted and clean. Syringes for shooting up to keep the energy going. Epoxy, because I'm a freak like that. You can buy all of this stuff like 10 times over and it still doesn't equal the cost of these. $300 just with one connector. But these are worthy of being on the engine. Look at that.
Wow.
Isn't that sick? Isn't it sick, Joel?
Yeah, it looks like a honeycomb.
Yeah, it's cool, except it's way more useful than a honeycomb. We're gonna have 3 connectors. This one's gonna be all of the oxygen sensors, both drive-by-wires, the electronic wastegate, pressure sensors, speed sensors, oil pressure, air temp, and all the spares are all gonna go to this connector. This will then go to the ECU, which is gonna sit somewhere here, And within that harness is where we're gonna do all the splicing. So every single piece on this engine will go to right here. So you can always get every injector individually, every spark plug individually, every sensor individually. And then we can splice stuff together to make it work from there. I think the first one we're gonna start with is the injector harnesses. All of these injectors are basically stage 1 and stage 2. One injector fires when the car's idling and 2 for more power. I'm gonna have all 24 injectors wired separately, and I did a lot of cool math on this. What I've done is calculated the amount of current that 24 injectors would use, which is actually close to 24 amps of current, and looked at how many pins 24 amps can go over without heating up too much. That gives me every single injector, so 24 pins for 24 injectors, and then it gives me a remainder that will all go together to send the power for the injectors separately. All 24 injectors can be touched and tapped and turned on and off from this connector, and then once that goes to the ECU, that's where I'll say, hey, you know what, those two play nice, go together. Engine 1 is bigger, mostly because I'm gonna have 3 full sets of wideband O2 sensors, and each of them have 6 wires. I'm sure we could pair some of those wires up together, but then I don't want that to mess up the results and then have to question anything. That's where the money was spent, and you get free little Ziplocs. That's my favorite part. These are really short IGN 1A coil connectors. Now I could have used Tyson's stuff, and I talked about how well it was, but he had all the splices in the harness, and I want the main harness to be controllable however we want. The old style, you put the wire through it, pull the end of the wire off, crimp the connector, and then pull it back, which means you have to have this much extra wire available to get each wire to go through the connector and back, and that just creates a really gross looking thing. So these are actually crimp them and push them in. This is a new thing that I'm really excited for. It's the boots meant specifically for that style of DTM connector. Having a heat shrink go from here to here, it always ends up pulling off of the connector and it looks like trash. This should, and it's got a lip inside of here, that's actually super clean. Look at that. That's
sex.
Yeah, and in theory, I almost don't want to put epoxy on there because look at that. So that lip inside of there with this lip in here is going to create that nice sort of resistance. If this was like an oil sensor where oil is going to get in this area, I would seal it. But this lets me service the connector, repin things, especially. Each turbo is going to have its own set of potential changes that we want to document. So what do I mean? This turbo right here spins at a different speed than each of the other turbos. They're all going to be very similar, but we need to measure and check that. But we don't need to keep sensors on all 3 turbos at all times. Same thing with the back pressure, is that all 3 turbos actually probably might have back pressure the whole time, but maybe we don't need it. Maybe it's redundant. Plus, all 3 turbos are going to have oxygen sensors. Instead of having where I change it and then realize I don't need that sensor and now I've got extra wires dangling, each of the 3 turbos is going to have where you can plug in the harness for the turbo. So if you want to do back pressure, or maybe you want to do inlet pressure or temperature coming off the turbo, whatever we're trying to diagnose, we can just connect in that little harness. I'm going to tell everybody right now is this is fully operational. There's no issue with this. Other than I feel like crimping is easier to inspect. You know, if one of these chunks of solder has a problem, it can be kind of challenging. So one of the things Tyson did that was actually pretty creative, he actually used the cable, the pin right here as the crimp to splice this one to another one. And so that's really clean because that means less splicing. There's not like a bunch of splits here. He has each of these wires run to one, it splits to the other one. That is one of the cleanest ways to do this. And that's actually why I ended up not using this, is because I can't undo that. Fixing this up is interesting to Joel. Making a wiring harness from scratch, that's torture for Joel. With all that considered, I knew which route I had to go. To kick off a wiring video, I already did the majority of planning, but right now it's to show you the thought process behind this. That is 8 injectors in a row, and you know what the easiest thing is going to be is we already know the distances. We have a main wire here. It's going to come down and break out into 3 sections. In each of the 3 sections, once it starts that run, the run's the same for all 3. I'm going to make sure that it is super clean. And so I think I might have it where it comes from the inside, hidden away from any sort of potential heat. The chance of crushing the wire is very slim. There's no heat on this side, so both sets will be along here for these 2. And then with the heat here, a little heat shield, and then have the other wires go here. Step one is that we're just gonna get out a chunk of wire, really shitty wire that I've been using for a while, and measure the approximate lengths and then add 6 to 8 inches to the number the same way I do when I'm... you just add inches. That's a good rule of thumb in life, is just to always, whatever number it is,
To account for
add a
heat
couple inches.
or whatever.
Yeah, the temperature, the camera angle, what you're working with, you never want to come up short. So that's a rule of thumb with life and wiring. And so wire's expensive, but it's more expensive to not have enough. And a foot of 22 gauge wire, which is what we're going to be using, even if you added a whole extra foot to the wire out of abundance of caution, still a couple cents. Adds up to a couple dollars over the course of the whole engine, but that's way cheaper than hours of your life wasted and having to get in more wire or make an extra connector. That's not worth it. So basically I'm gonna measure this out, and then you'll see a cool little gross drawing of how I think we're gonna split this up. I'm gonna get this whole thing done today. Are we talking midnight today?
Hey, if today's today.
It's 1:43, my heart rate's steady, I'm calm. There's a payoff, I don't know what it is, but if I can get this whole harness done in the next 12 hours and 17 minutes, I'm gonna be pretty proud of myself too. With this in mind, we know that we've got a baby short run before stuff starts to split up. And we've definitely determined that, yeah, we're gonna have one rail hide under here. The second one I think is gonna go down and then go to the middle rail, which is currently missing because it's up there. And then the third one is gonna reach around, hide under here. If it gets too hot, we'll just have it go up back here and then go under and then continue on. So we're gonna do something kind of interesting, and this is very commonly done, especially when they only make, I think, 4 or 5, maybe even 3 styles per size of connector. So this size is called a, 14? This is 37 pins, 22 gauge pins, or they'll have like a couple 16. You know, they mix it up, but there's only 3 options. What we're gonna do is pass the power for all the injectors through these wires right here. Now there's enough pins that we'll actually have 12 power wires. So 1 power wire for every 2 injectors. I'm not gonna take all of these and then get them to 2 injectors and then split them. That's too many splices that could fail at any point. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have 4 wires going into this that will then go to rail 1. These 4 will then crimp to the 8 power wires for the rest of this. It's a very small crimp, very easy to work with, very flexible. And that will go to all of rail 1, and that stays in one spot. Second one, you know, back here, and third one back here. So it'll run on 4 wires for a distance and then go down to 8, and that's just 3 crimps. So the crimps are the most important part of like harnesses. Once we do that, we can just take every single injector wire, which is all gonna be blue, and make all 24 also connect to this, and then pin everything into this connector. Really, you'll just see a bunch of zip ties and wires just going in their directions before we start splitting them out and putting all the heat shielding on this. So this is actually going to be a pretty therapeutic step, and definitely going to make it easy for me to get this done by midnight. This is 24 injectors, and this is 24 injector powers. I did choose 2 lengths only because the front half of the motor and the back half of the motor are so distinctly, there's an extra foot of distance there, so I did save some wire doing that. What I'm gonna be doing now is taking a set of these, crimping to a couple of these, and then those are the only crimps that are gonna be in this entire harness, but I wanna do those first, seal them up, and then play dress up and try and figure out how long I'm gonna make all the wires from there to here. 24 of these are easy. I could just pin them in right now and then kind of dole them out, and that's what we'll do, but the important part is these crimps. So we have all of these crimps done, and what you'll notice is that I chose to do a linear crimp. I don't know the correct names for them, but instead of having all the wires come out of one side, I have the wires that are going this way and the wires going that way. These I'm not worried about them being in a high stress environment, even though it's on the top of a 12 rotor. It's just that they're not gonna get pulled on because they're stuck to the manifold. So the chance of these getting ripped on isn't high at all. It's not gonna look like this in a second. We're gonna take all these and go over to the manifold and kind of get an idea of where the crimps are gonna split. And then we just attach all the blue ones to these, and that's the core of the harness. Each one of these basically is gonna go down the runners, but you'll notice that one of these, the yellow one, is longer because I suspect if we make this perfectly tight, that's the absolute minimum. We now have to think about, we'll just try the next easiest one. Put it here and go to the same spot. This one's a little bit harder. It's basically gonna go all the way, almost all the way down.
What about removing it then? Because this
That sucks.
almost seems like you should have a connector there.
I don't, but if I do that, if I do a connector there, I'm not gonna make it mil spec because I'm lazy. I'm gonna start working on this last little bit, but that's exactly where it's gonna go. And then I literally gonna take all 24 blue wires and then just send 12 with this one, 12 with this one, 12 with this one, and you guessed it, split them all off. It's gonna come together pretty quickly, and then you'll see a harness in an extra couple seconds probably for you. There you go. There's the beginning of a harness, and it looks, look at this, just blue and red. The important part is the little shaft right here. And you can see, I decided only to put the circles on the power wires. Power goes through the whole circuit, but those are the ones that are all connected to each other right here. So I don't want any one of them to rip on the rest of them harder. So you can see there's the split for the first section. Let's go ahead and look at the engine and see if that makes sense. So there you have it. That part will kind of break off right in there. So it's a little bit longer than I was actually hoping for, which is rare. Which is actually rare, because really I'd want it to kind of break up right there. And now look at how high that puts this. So I kind of messed up. Made it a little too long. And so the issue is that now the break off is going to kind of come down and then up. And that just looks a little cheesy. So one of the things I think I might do is actually make these a little bit larger. So that way this can boop, like that. Obviously we have our DR25, and we are going to put that kind of somewhere maybe here to the midpoint of this, but we gotta make this thing look good, right? This is the boot, so that boot will go over that, and it's gonna be a straight boot. I'm gonna amend my bet with Joel. I said that I'd have it done by tonight, and I think I should just make that definition a little bit more vague, because it is currently 9:18 and it's not looking good for me. If this was a 4-rotor, I'd be done by now. This is a completed 24 injector harness. One of the problems with these connectors is they actually have hooks. This part right here is going to be a problem no matter what. So even if I sealed the ends of these, I would have had to like get a boot that covers everything. So I gave up on that. So the only thing I need to do is when I bust out the epoxy is glue the boot onto here. That's the only thing left. Maybe put a little bit of glue inside of there. There are 3 main stalks. I'm pretty excited how I labeled them too because it's super confusing. But we'll start with the one you guys can see. Any sort of joint with the zip ties, I hid those behind every single runner. I might notch into that fuel rail so the connector can get further away from the heat coming right here. But either way, these will come down like this, and that is all you'll see. This one is gonna hide kind of down in here, and then reach up and go onto each of the injectors. They'll sit somewhere like this. So there should be a connector here, so we can take this manifold off. Every single one's separate on the splices here. And the reason why is no matter what, you can look at these and say, oh yeah, that's injector 12. But you can also tell, hey, that injector goes between this one and this one. You don't even have to think as much, and that's gonna help with any of the guys in a hurry. Step 2 is gonna be getting the ignition harness working, which is almost the same exact concept. 24 things, all to one connector. It will not be mil spec because it's down there and it might move if we go to put it in a car. The heat is on, it's Wednesday now. What is it, Saturday is?
SevenStock.
SevenStock. Even if it doesn't fire up at SevenStock, if it can sputter and fire up, I guess Friday night. Jesus, it's only 3 days of work. This is a 2-gauge wire, and it's almost not enough. It's very close. If all of these coils were to start charging, or if the engine was, I'd say, at 10,000 RPM, this thing's gonna get pretty hot. We're gonna basically have a power line, and then that will go up to a ground stud. This ground stud is actually going to also go to the ECU, and then the power stud will be right here, so there'll be different lengths. And then the power will go to a 100 amp breaker. I have 100 and 120, depending on how hard this thing pulls. One of the things we need to do though is split this into each of the 3 rows. So I have this 8-gauge wire here, so it'll be one of these to 3 of these. Since this is so inflexible, this is really gonna be the core of the harness whether I want it to be or not. We're gonna go ahead and do one of Joel's favorite things, and I'm gonna cut some power wire. It's got a very thick jacket. I ordered the wrong version, but in this case, that's gonna be great for any sort of crush resistance. So we're gonna take out 3 4-foot sections of this. Okay, that right there was probably like 20 bucks. This is really gonna dictate the shape because we can't bend this, especially when they're in triple. It's gonna be very hard to make a tight radius, kind of forcing our hand on how we're gonna build this thing. One of the things I'm going to be doing is wrapping this with that thick black wire, and they're all gonna be twisting together because it's gonna reduce the electromagnetic signal coming off of these wires. They're just gonna be sucking down a shit ton of current. So I was originally going to have all 3 of these go to each of the rows and then splice to single wire as well, but I realized that that's just gonna make it more complicated. This harness is getting out of control, so I decided to bust out the stuff that we haven't used in a long time. And to prove that point, there is actually my 1,000,000 subscriber plaque. I refuse to put that up. I don't feel like I deserve it. This is 1-inch DR25. This stuff's, I don't even know how much it is per foot. I bought it a while ago. It's sadly gonna be necessary for some of these runs. This is the main split, and I don't even think I'll have enough to get over this. Like a mind-numbing number of wires going through all of this shit. Power, ground, signal wire, spark circuit. And so all of that is gonna come to here. So I'm worried about these runs because as soon as you start splicing it here, there'll be so many extra wires, 8 of these, that you won't be able to get this correct harness sheathing on here. So as soon as these splices are on, you can't get to this spot at all. And so I'm trying to think ahead, figure out how long this needs to be, put that section on there, and then like pull the foreskin back, kind of crimp it there, hold it there, and then make the crimp, and then let it release and go to that. As long as the video is rolling, I don't actually have to do work, I can just talk. Joel's not gonna let me do that. This whole chunk of aluminum is one massive chunk, so if you were to measure continuity from here to here, you have that entire piece of metal to go through that. There are 6 spark plugs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those 6 spark plugs need to get the same core ground. We are going to have 4 grounds. One for this one for this one for this one, and one for this one. It makes it kind of complicated for me because that means these two, and these two are all going to get a shared ground, and so on. That means that there's 6 wires being split into 3. To make that a little bit simpler, each of the rows are going to have their own stalks. That means that there's going to be 8 wires that go to different things. It's easy to mess this up. So to correspond to each of those stalks, or each of those plates, I'm going to take 1 wire for each plate, which is 4 plates. We're going to do this 6 times. Okay, boom. I got them all piled up. There's going to be 4 wires going off to the engine, but then 6 of these, 2 of them will go to this short stalk, 2 of them will go to this one, and 2 of them will go to this one. Each one of these stalks are going to get 2 of each of these, and then 4 of the result wires go back to the engine. So that gets really confusing very quickly. 16 wires are going to go to this. It's a mess. It's going to be a mess. So that's why it's going to be impossible to get past these knots. I'm just going to hammer through. Just going to do it. Joel's leaving me, and normally that's a joyous occasion, but in this case I'm all alone left to this. The hard part is done. Right now I've got all the wires routed for all of the spark plug grounds, all of the signals, and really everything that will be going through this stalk. This is what will be covering it, and as you can tell, I made it a little bit longer because this stubby right there is going to turn into 16 wires and 8 wires. So it's going to just get fat from there. So my hope is that we pull this back, do all the crimping, which is kind of a pain in the ass, and then boom, that whole run is hovered, and I don't have this massive gap here. This is all the wire that's going to be going through this area. So unfortunately, I'm going to be using the 3M 1.5" stuff and shrinking it down. You guys are going to see a time lapse of me go insane, and it might blank out, as I might too. One of the things that I'm hoping is, you can see these are all the connectors and the little booties. Those are all end up going on the ends of these long wires. Each purple one will go to a different connector, and then each other colors will go to that same connector. So there's 8. Today's Wednesday. It is 7:30. This is gonna be a little bit harder than the injector harness, but I do think I can get it done tonight. Tomorrow I get to do the engine harness, and then Friday I would do the core harness, like the ECU and the power and all that. So wish me luck. Failed last night. I got so far, but in the end it doesn't really matter. They are coil 1, 2, 3, and so on, which means this is the front one, but it's actually 17, 18, 19, and 24. That's just like the injector harness. I hid the big splices inside of here, so that's pretty movable, but this isn't really gonna bend much. The other side that I'm really happy about is actually I worked on this end. The only thing that I'm bummed out about is I wasn't able to wrap this area in tape because it was so wide and it's in the middle of all this that it's a little bumpy. Let me show you where this is gonna go, because this is actually pretty exciting. If I have it sit right here, well, you can't get to the plugs as easily, and it starts blocking the little heat sinks. So if I have it like this, we can actually keep it right there and then have them plop on like this. So you can see them quickly and you have access to everything. And so that'll be 1, 2, and 3. These two I still have to crimp. This is gonna sit right here. Originally, I gave it enough room to sit on the bottom, but I thought if these wheels crack or if somebody picks it up with a forklift, thank you, instantly crushes my harness. I've separated the data wires. What's gonna happen is this will split into 2 connectors, and both connectors will sit at the bottom of this, mounted to little tabs, and so you just plug the main harness into them. This is the ECU. It's gonna sit kind of right here with enough room between it and the dash, and so that puts the ground in line here, and that puts the power in line here. So I want it aesthetically where this cable goes from here to a stud, this to a stud. I put all these wires in shielded twisted pairs because these are gonna have the spark plug energy going out the other side. For now, I'm gonna have it go to, sadly, 1 block over and then 1 block over. So there'll be block 4, block 3, block 2, and block 1. And there's 2 more up here. So all 4 will have the 4 spark plug grounds touching the piece. So it's about as close as I can get. Now that we have things that are like dictating where stuff has to go, I can now start making and planning the actual engine harness, the throttle bodies, the oxygen sensors, fuel pressure, oil pressure, the E-gate, all of those things now go into this harness that is going to be up here. We are at the moment where it is time to create a harness from absolutely nothing. I did the injector harness, which was relatively the simplest one, and then the ignition harness, which was more complicated, but still, everything's in place. We've ran those parts so many times it doesn't become questionable for us. So I want to make sure that it's the final version of the wiring harness, even if the intake manifold makes changes. This has 2 injectors per rotor, and these are 2000s, but they could be 2600s. So we'll just say that 2 2600s with ethanol. Realistically, 350 horsepower per rotor, somewhere in there. So 350 times 10 is 3,500 plus another 2. So we got about 4,000 horsepower in ethanol, which is 2,000 horsepower in methanol when it comes down to fuel usage. So we don't have enough injector. That's, again, if we upgrade these. So this turbo, which weighs 63 pounds, is going to create a lot of heat. But back in the 90s, back when turbochargers were way less efficient, engineers figured, well, we don't need an intercooler to slow down the airflow. Let's put methanol into the front of the turbo and then have that cold air, much colder air, go into the throttle body. Now, I think we all can say, biggest concern is, what about when you have a blow-off valve or you let off and the air comes out of the motor, and there's fuel in that. And that is, in fact, something that could have happened with these. They had what was called a pop-off valve. That was actually a race limiting thing. You didn't want to go over a certain amount of boost or the valve would pop open. So on this, though, when we go to use all of the power, there's not going to be a blow-off valve per se. There's going to be just feed the motor. And then when we go to let off, we can tell those injectors to stop. Why do I tell you all this? We have to think about those injectors. And I think what I'm going to do is have 4 injectors on each turbo. So that's another 12 injectors.
Jeez.
I know that we can hit our high level goals by feeding the front of the turbos a shit ton of methanol. That's dangerous, and I'm here for that. But the wiring has to be here for that too. And there's going to be a connector for each turbo. Well, that connector is going to have the oxygen sensor as well as the option to add 4 injectors. So that's why it's a connector, because we don't have those injectors yet. I think about the throttle bodies, having both of those. Technically, there's going to be 3 throttle bodies. The 2 up here, and then the electronic boost gate here. I've got it pretty much mapped out now. One interesting thing is this alternator is not a controllable alternator, as in it's self-exciting, everything's internal, so simplicity is the name of the game with this one. So this alternator is only going to get power to it. There's no signal wire, no nothing. Joel is being a hater because he's like, this is the 5th time I've seen you do this. Yeah, it's the 5th time I've had to do this, but it's the first time I'm going on to the next level, and you have to build off of what you made. This is a very meticulous process. And
you always scratch your eye when you lie?
Yeah, Joel's really awesome. The thing I'm starting to do now is figure out this clusterfuck. This is an oxygen sensor, and my goal is to make it look Tyson worthy. So the connector sitting out here doesn't pass the Tyson test. So I want to make sure that we can get these kind of longer runners on the oxygen sensor. So a lot of them will come short too. I was originally going to make a connector, like I said earlier, in the middle, and I still will, but it just won't include this because I bought these connectors, so I can just make that one directly. But back here, we have to start being very careful because I want this fuel pressure regulator, I want all this compact, and that's going to cause problems. So the engine harness is going to sit over here as planned before. It's looking really good for that. I've used every single one of these 55 pins.
I don't see anything in there.
I'm this close to snapping. Every single one of those have been written down and accounted for.
For sure. Right here?
Not there. on the Heltex NSP software. I'll show you guys in a second. Joel wants me to show you guys the document, the Excel document I made, and go through every single one of the 55 lines to show you exactly. You know, we'll list every single one of those. Starting with sensor ground, we've got sensor 5 volts, crank angle sensor negative. That was a lot of fun, wasn't that, guys? With all these fuel lines, there's 2 here, 2 down here, and 2 here. One of each of these will go to this. And so I think this one's pretty easy. That will go straight to 90. This is where it gets a little complicated. I think I might actually use this one to like a more than 90. Get it down to this area here. Now we have the return line down here, so it's basically gonna kind of do that. And then this one would do a 90 and then a 45 into here. So it looks a little bit backwards, but that would keep it really nice and clean. One of the things I'm trying to avoid is putting any sort of fuel system up here. Whatever we do for transmission, I don't want fuel lines in the shear area of the nastiness that could happen here. Instead, I want them in the gear, above the gear set that could probably shear even quicker, or onto a manifold that's probably going to balloon and burst. This, at least, we can now have a little line going from here right to the manifold. Front is going to have an oxygen sensor for the front turbo, another connector for all the front turbo stuff, but then there's going to be another connector under here. So there's 3 connectors. One is going to be for 1, 2, and 3 throttle bodies. The way that that's wired, every single one's independent. So I've just gently set this onto the manifold. Ultimately, this is going to be 2 drive-by-wire throttles. We only have 1 right now, and actually this one's for the 4-rotor. This is the plan. There's a lot of 6 inches, and there's a lot of 12 inches. And that's like Joel and me.
Take that however you want.
Yeah, take it, yeah. Those of you guys that remember or love the wiring video, like Joel, will know that my favorite wire, I truly have an emotional, like...
Twisted pair.
The reason I mention this is these are all going to be running through this harness, creating the smallest amount of interference, but that's what the shield on this is for. The entire making this work on a Haltech is the trigger sensor. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, this has me a little scared. I don't need this sort of resolution to make this engine work very well. So my fear is that at speed, those teeth, this sensor, we might lose some sort of signal, and then pop goes the motor. Thankfully, the Haltech's really good about trigger errors, but the most important thing is that this sensor doesn't get covered in oil and doesn't get electromagnetic frequency. So if I come up this way, there's a turbo and high heat here. That's not good. If I go down this way, which is how it was before, I've got 320 amps that is going to be sucked down at the peak of this performance, so I don't want to lose the signal there. If I go down and under here, keeps it clean. And then if I go down this side, well, I still have to go past all the spark plugs. What's going to happen, it'll go up. We'll have it inside of a little zip tie clips to make it nice and vertical or clean. Then that will go up to about right here. So the wire here will travel along and go down to here. That way, disconnect, manifold comes up, engine harness stays with the manifold. These wires, this is my favorite quick term, half bridge. Half bridge is like the salsa. It's almost like AC power, to be honest. It's kind of funny, is that one wire can positive, one wire can negative, and then they can do the reverse. That's how each of these are controlled. Open and close, E-gate, boost gate, you name it, all those things all use half bridge. What works best for that? I'm gonna use pre-twisted CAN bus wire to minimize the amount of interference this has on things outside of it. So the two kind of neutralize each other. And I have plenty. So that way I can tell, hey, this is motor A and B, send it back and forth, and away we go. So I'm gonna go ahead and start running the core of the harness. Enjoy this little quick time lapse of me playing at a table, playing with wires. I hope you have as much fun as I do. I am super excited to show you guys that this, even in its raw form, is every bit of wiring up to this point on the engine. This is essentially complete, it's all done. And what I mean by that is that, first of all, it's not in the right locations. These will actually tuck underneath the rail and really be way smaller and hide behind the runners. But all of the fuel injectors are there, and then so is everything else. I just haven't finished the connectors. There's that throttle body, and then it splits into two, and it'll go to both throttle bodies. I haven't finally decided which way that's gonna work. And then this right here would go to the boost gate. And this is all of the wires to the turbo. This is all the wire for the oxygen sensor. This side turbos, same couple wires. Right here is this side's oxygen sensor as well. So everything is built into just these two connectors. So I'm really happy with this, because when it's all hidden, like truly hidden, you won't notice it other than 55 wires here and 36 wires here. The other really cool thing, one of these ports will just have a little 1/8 inch MPT, and then the sensor will plug into that. That'll be super clean. And then over here, oil sensors, which are kind of angling towards this way, because the closest thing I can tap into is this filter for the moment. Here is coolant temp sensor, which is perfect because this is a coolant line. This is the map sensor, and that'll be underneath there. It might be right here, just something so you can visually inspect it. There's also hidden under there somewhere is the air temperature. And then, of course, this turbo's speed, EMAP, extra injectors, you name it, they're all there. We'll have basically 3 connectors. All 3 of those will come together and go to the computer. To save pins, because these pins are expensive, that's 55 pins. Each pin is, if you buy them in bulk, $1, so it's $55 to repin this. So what I'm gonna do is have all of those go to a spot, and then maybe crimp them together at the ECU, like, hey, these 2 injectors and so on. So then we cut this end. We don't have to mess with these wires over here. SevenStock is hours away. Obviously, at this point, nobody knows this, but this thing's not gonna start. But I think we're gonna transport it without the turbos. So we're gonna have to hook into these massive holes here, and then something on the front. A buddy of mine's actually coming by tomorrow morning to take this to SevenStock, and that's no small feat. I'm gonna continue wiring that last harness, taking 24 and turning them into 12, start mounting things on that back board. I'm using this semi-dead box to my advantage and using it as a drilling template. That's nice and clean. I'm glad I did this. I was kind of thinking, oh man, I should have put the other boxes here, but the alternator is also gonna come from here and go down to this. I think I'll put the plastic side out, or I can do it this way.
I don't know. You tell me, stud.
I've got all this mounted. I'm really happy with how these turned out. This is power, this is ground. This is honestly like my favorite, like icing on the cake is These two have to go to here. The purple wires all down here have to go to here. How do we do that without having to remake the harness multiple times if we put this in a vehicle? Think about all the constraints, as many as you can. One is that we have the fuel system all right in this area. This line will go to the intake manifold, and then we'll have hoses doing what they do. But that does give us enough room here. So what I'm thinking, have a 90 come off of this one, go across the top, and then go past like a zip tie here and go down. Same thing with this one. This one goes 90 down. So both of them are on the manifold. You pull on them, they're not going to rip the connectors. And then we can have this come down, go behind the plate, run it along this ridge here, and then have it go straight into the ECU. Do you have them all go left turn, left turn, left turn, left turn? Or do you do the opposite, you know, right turn, right turn, right turn? Or do you do central? Because that's kind of setting it in stone. So I think what I'm going to do is make each one of them longer than I normally do, you know, instead of all of them being stubby. That way, if we do need to turn the ECU in the real car, okay, one of them bunches up, but it can be physically moved. And one of the sets, like I said, is, no matter what, is going to have to come down to this corner for the ignition. So that harness really ties it all together, and we can start running power lines. My favorite part here is this is square. We got a lot of work to do, and this is the foundation of it. That's 100 and whatever feet, and then we actually have 30 injectors. I'm going to add a nice power wire into this, and this, no matter what, can be the core of the harness because we just know that's done. Injectors, computer, done. And one of the greatest things about this, we'll take 2 injectors, I can crimp them into 1 connector and fill 12 injectors with 24 injectors. That way, for right now, they all go to 1 ECU. They might go to 2. They might do something different, but at least the entire length of the run is all unspliced. With this being over 3 days of wiring, Joel and I are both losing our sanity. Joel more than me. I don't know why that's the case. Please admire. This is the core harness, all the bundles, all there. They're all 6 foot long, which gives me all the length I need. But I wanted to do some quick math for you. That's 91 wires. But they're all 6 feet, so that's 550 feet of wire sitting on the floor that Joel keeps stepping on. 550 feet, even at our bulk rate, which is about 30 cents a foot for 22 gauge wire, that's $140 in wire. Just, jeez. That's just, yeah. We're gonna go pick up the trailer for SevenStock, so that's gonna pause this. My face is actually tired because I have to get up early for SevenStock, not because I stayed up late. I guess I kind of did both. But there's a guy named Angelitos who's going to come pick up the 12 rotor, help me solve that while I pick the 3 rotor up and all of these massive turbos to make it out to SevenStock. I've broken down all of the intake manifolds, exhaust manifolds, kind of got it to its core, and put these on all 4 corners, and then added these if we need extra stability, but I figured it's just not even worth it. Right, baby kitty? He's here.
I feel like I'm loading up
a nuclear warhead.
Yeah.
Chaotic morning, to say the least, because I was focused on the engine, and we don't have tickets, so I had to worm my way in here. The engine guy also can't get in, so I'm gonna go ahead and get the 3 rotor unloaded, and then we'll probably put the 12 rotor right next to this. There she is. We have got the car and the engine and a lot of turbos. It's all turbo stuff. I gotta start reassembling it somehow. When you hear the brapping and you see the smoke, you know that we're at one place, and that is SevenStock. Now the sun is bright, which is why I asked them to get me in the shade. What Joel and I have been talking about behind the scenes is I gotta put the turbos back on, and it is gonna be a pain in the ass. So watch me struggle. I already set the camera down here while Joel was still sleeping in Betty Bye. And so, okay,
Someone
he got
sounds
to sleep.
jealous.
No, not at all. I couldn't find any of the nuts for this. I don't know where Rob put them. I'm gonna take these that are meant for the fuel rails and put 2 on here and make it work, because I want people to see just how massive and confusing this engine gets. 2 bolts should hold up a whole 65-pound turbo and manifold for sure. Easy. Let's see if I can do this single-handedly.
Oh,
I believe in it.
You're getting there.
Nope, I'm gonna try and struggle. It's getting harder though with the heavier. Oh no. No. Center myself. I'm gonna rip the tendons out of my bicep doing this. Okay.
You need me to get under there? Let me know.
I know they can help me, but it's between Joel and I.
Oh, you got this time. First time with practice.
That's right.
Oh, I feel like you already screwed it up.
You think so?
Yeah. How are you gonna? Okay. I feel like breakfast is in order once you get this done.
Okay. I may have to ask for help.
He's YouTube certified. I don't know if
certified mechanic here.
That's what I needed.
It's not too bad.
Thank you. You're making it look way easier than I was hoping. There we go. We're done. That's it. So heavy. So the downside to being close to the front stage is they play loud music. And it hits the side of the trailer and bounces back into my ear, so I will be deaf not from rotary noises. But we finally get away from the copyrighted music to go shake down Mazda tricks to get mine and Hertz 4 rotors that are all balanced. So time to put the Hurt down.
There's 2 boxes with the shafts, like that.
Okay, yeah. So the E-shaft, I'll probably have to do one
shaft at a time.
Yeah. Okay. That's Hertz. Oh hell yeah! Look at how much he took off of the counterweight. That's sick. So this is extremely bittersweet. This event, SevenStock, is the 3rd to last event ever at Irwindale. I mean, this is iconic. It's even Fast and Furious movies. It's just another iconic place closing for real. And why I wanted to be right here talking about this is where we did the all-wheel drive burnout chained to that container back there. One of the most iconic, God knows what's gonna happen moments in my life. Borderline crying, just excitement. Like, this is a very important moment and place and time for me. And it's a bummer that this will end up being commercial warehousing or something like that, the usual. It's super expensive to keep operating this place here when they can just sell it and make even more money. So while the event is a exciting, fun time, it's also kind of got this like, bummer, yet again, another iconic place closing. Whatever way you slice it, we didn't make it to SevenStock with a running or capable to start 12 rotor. It is just this insane. Booting this and doing this part is the time it takes me to do a whole 4 rotor engine harness. It's just a lot. And like, look at this. My hand doesn't look this rough since I was single. An insane amount of work. And that's the point, is that we want to share with you guys what it's like we have deadlines for this thing that we want to see happen, and while they're not like hardcore deadlines, they're emotional deadlines, and we shot straight through them. So the cool part is that this is days away, but it's like if I say, hey, it's gonna be 2 months, it's actually 3 months. Hey, if I say it's gonna be 3 weeks, it's actually 4 weeks. It just keeps getting closer to where it's just a little bit, and then we finally chase up to it. The final harness is coming along. I've probably got another 2 days before I feel confident firing this up with this stuff, and that's okay though, because Rob's working on all the other stuff that actually is needed to start this thing. So we've got the whole fuel system still to wire up. We got the oil system to just finalize, and then it's a power on test.